So imagine you're hitting a personal best on a heavy squat one week, right? Like you feel totally locked in, solid, just completely dependable.
Yeah, you feel invincible.
Exactly. But then you try that exact same weight, maybe 2 weeks later, but this time your joints feel loose, your balance is shaky, and, well, worse, you leak a little urine on the way up.
Oh, yeah, which is just a completely disorienting experience.
It really is. And, I mean, you haven't lost your fitness, but your body has literally changed its structural architecture.
It's an incredibly frustrating reality for so many people. I mean, they step into the gym or, head out for a run, and their body simply refuses to respond the way it did just a few days prior.
Right, they just hit a wall.
Exactly. And they start questioning their training, their strength, even like their aging process. But when we look at the underlying science, it is purely a matter of temporary, highly predictable biochemistry.
And that is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We're pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources spanning urology, sports medicine, and physical therapy to answer one highly specific question.
It's a great question, too.
It is. How exactly does the hormonal shift during the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle physically alter connective tissue elasticity? And, how does that impact the severity of stress, urinary incontinence, or SUI?
Whether you experience this personally or whether you're a coach training people who do, or if you simply just love understanding the hidden biomechanics of the human body, the research we're looking at today completely reframes how we view physical stability.
Yeah, it really blows up the idea that our bodies are just static machines.
Totally. I mean, we're talking about an anatomical support system that physically remodels itself from the inside out on a monthly basis.
Which is just wild to think about. But before we get into the mechanisms of why a system might suddenly fail under pressure, we need to understand the hormonal renovation crew that kind of takes over the body.
Let's set the stage, yeah.
Yeah. Can you do that for us? What is the luteal phase and what is actually happening chemically?
Well, the menstrual cycle is basically a story of two halves. So the first half is the follicular phase, where the body is, preparing to release an egg.
Right, leading up to ovulation.
Exactly. Then you have ovulation. And immediately after ovulation, we enter the luteal phase, which lasts for roughly the next 14 days, right up until menstruation begins.
Oh, okay.
And during this specific window, the biological landscape of the body completely transforms.
So what triggers that transformation? Is it like a sudden drop in hormones after the egg is released, or?
It is actually the creation of a brand new temporary organ.
Wait, what?
Yeah. When the ovarian follicle ruptures to release the egg during ovulation, the shell of that ruptured follicle collapses in on itself and transforms into an endocrine gland. It's called the corpus luteum.
A temporary gland?
Yes, it's wild. This temporary gland has one massive critical job. It just starts pumping out staggering amounts of progesterone to prepare the body for a potential pregnancy.
The body just builds a new hormone factory from scratch every single month.
It does. I mean, it is a phenomenal piece of biological engineering. And that factory immediately takes over the system.
Okay, that actually challenges a lot of the conventional wisdom we hear, because estrogen usually gets all the attention when people talk about the menstrual cycle, right?
Oh, for sure.
It's always the hormone that dictates mood and energy. But looking at these sports medicine sources, it seems like progesterone, along with another hormone called relaxin, are the real architects of this specific 2-week window.
Yeah, estrogen is absolutely fluctuating during this time. I mean, it drops after ovulation, rises slightly, and then plummets toward the end of the luteal phase.
Right.
But you are observing the data correctly. Progesterone is the dominant force here, and relaxin is just the absolute wild card.
Wild card, yeah.
Because relaxin surges and becomes highly active during the mid-luteal phase, it peaks around days 21 to 24 of the cycle.
Which is funny because most of us only ever hear about relaxin in the context of late-stage pregnancy.
Right, as the thing that loosens everything up.
Yeah, the hormone that loosens the pelvis so a baby can actually be delivered.
It definitely does that.
Yeah.
But it is also produced in smaller amounts during every single menstrual cycle by that corpus luteum we just talked about.
Wow.
And here's the crucial mechanism for our discussion today. Progesterone, relaxin, and estrogen do not just stay in the reproductive organs.
They travel everywhere.
Exactly. They have receptors located throughout the entire musculoskeletal system. They are literally embedding themselves in your bones, your skeletal muscles, your ligaments, your nervous system, and your pelvic fascia.
So they're actively communicating with the structural support system of the entire body.
Yes.
If the whole body is receiving these signals, What are those hormones physically doing to the ligaments and connective tissue?
They are actively changing the mechanical properties of the tissue. So let's look at relaxin first, because its mechanism is just incredible.
Okay, let's do it.
Relaxin literally remodels your tissue by activating specific enzymes called matrix metalloproteinases, or MMPs.
Matrix metalloproteinases.
Yeah, quite a mouthful. Specifically, it activates collagenases and gelatinases.
I mean, that sounds like something out of a science fiction movie. What are those enzymes actually doing on a cellular level?
Think of them as a biological demolition crew. So collagen is the primary protein that makes up your connective tissue.
Right, it's the strong stuff.
Yeah, it is what gives your ligaments, tendons, and fascia their firm tensile strength. When relaxin triggers these collagenase enzymes, they go in and start breaking down that collagen structure.
Just tearing it apart.
Exactly. While simultaneously telling the body to suppress the creation of any new collagen. The net result is a significant increase in ligament laxity. Your internal support structures physically become looser.
So biochemically, it is like the body is replacing the rigid steel beams of a bridge with highly elastic bungee cords.
That is a perfect analogy, yeah.
I can see how that is incredibly useful if you need flexibility to accommodate a growing embryo, but man, it sounds like a nightmare if you are relying on that bridge for firm, unyielding support during a heavy lift.
Oh, absolutely. You are trading stiffness for compliance, and it is a massive evolutionary trade-off. But relaxin isn't even working alone here.
All right, there's a whole crew.
You have this cascading effect driven by progesterone. Progesterone has its own muscle-relaxing properties, which independently affects exercise performance and coordination.
Oh, wow.
But more importantly, progesterone actively amplifies the tissue's response to relaxin. It is essentially turning up the volume on the relaxin receptors, making the tissues like hypersensitive to that collagen-degrading effect.
Okay, so we've got relaxin tearing down the structural support and progesterone just standing there making sure the demolition crew works overtime.
Yeah, pretty much.
But where does estrogen fit into all of this? Because you said it drops, right? If estrogen is plummeting at the end of the luteal phase, does that make the loosening effect even worse?
It does, because normally estrogen is highly protective of your connective tissue. Research indicates that estrogen helps maintain tissue elasticity and mechanical strength through these specific receptor pathways.
Okay, so it's helping hold things together.
Yeah. The sources highlight one called GPR30.
GPR30. Is that a protein or?
It is a receptor. Think of GPR30 as the foreman on the construction site.
Okay, I like that.
As long as estrogen is binding to that receptor, the foreman is telling the workers to keep the structural integrity high. It maintains the expression of elastin and collagen in the pelvic support ligaments.
Got it.
But as you move into the late luteal phase, those days right before menstruation begins, estrogen levels just fall off a cliff.
So the foreman literally leaves the construction site right as the demolition crew arrives.
Exactly. The withdrawal of estrogen means a rapid decline in structural support, a decrease in muscle stiffness, and a huge alteration in how the body handles pressure.
That's a huge shift.
It really is. This shift makes the connective tissue highly pliable. And for people who already deal with conditions like hypermobility, this luteal phase spike in relaxin and progesterone is just one more variable making their joint stability feel entirely unpredictable.
That sounds so frustrating to deal with.
It is. In fact, sports medicine studies tracking female athletes found that objective measures of whole body laxity, like testing how far the knee can hyperextend, measurably increase in phases tracking with these exact hormonal shifts.
If the whole body is essentially turning into this looser, springier version of itself, that has to be incredibly difficult for areas of the body that rely on strict tension.
Oh, definitely.
Like the pelvic floor. How does it handle that physical pressure? Let's talk about the mechanics of stress urinary incontinence.
Right. So to understand the failure, we first have to define the mechanism of SUI. The word stress in stress urinary incontinence is entirely physical.
We aren't talking about emotional stress or a tough day at work.
No, not at all. We are talking about physical intra-abdominal pressure.
Like the downward force created inside the torso when you do things like run, jump, hop, cough, sneeze, or, brace for a heavy lift.
Exactly. When you perform any of those actions, that intra-abdominal pressure pushes down forcefully onto the bladder. To prevent urine from leaking out during that high-impact moment, your anatomy relies on a mechanical backstop.
Okay, a backstop.
Yeah, the urethra, which is the tube that carries urine out of the body, needs to be able to compress firmly against the pelvic floor muscles and the surrounding ligaments.
Right.
If it compresses against a firm, rigid surface, The tube squeezes shut securely, and you stay dry.
But because those luteal phase hormones have remodeled those ligaments and muscles to be more compliant.
The support system has become springy.
Ah, I see.
So when the downward pressure pushes on the urethra, instead of hitting a from wall and squeezing shut, the backstop just yields. It gives way.
It's basically a trampoline instead of a brick wall.
Exactly. Because the support system lacks rigidity, the urethra cannot compress effectively against it. The internal pressure overcomes the weakened seal, and a leak occurs.
But why would the body allow a critical system to fail like that? I mean, is it just a biological design flaw, or is the body prioritizing something else entirely?
It is all about prioritizing reproduction over mechanical performance. The body is operating under the assumption that an embryo might be implanting.
It's prepping for a baby, always.
Yep. It wants a soft, compliant, yielding environment in the pelvic region to accommodate that potential growth. The biological imperative is to protect a potential pregnancy, not to ensure you can run a marathon without leaking.
It doesn't care about my Strava times.
Not even a little bit. Your body doesn't care about your deadlift max. It cares about creating a hospitable environment for reproduction.
We actually have some really compelling clinical data in the sources about how common this specific failure is. Can you walk us through that urology study?
Yeah, this is fascinating. One of the standout studies from our urology sources looked at 133 premenopausal women. And to isolate the variables, the researchers ensured these women had regular periods and were not taking any artificial hormone.
Like birth control.
Right, because that would override the natural luteal phase. So out of those 133 women, 41% reported experiencing urinary incontinence at different times during their cycle.
That is nearly half the participants.
Yeah.
Just dealing with this.
Yeah, but the timing is what makes this so relevant to our discussion, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Of the women who experienced incontinence, a massive 42% found that their symptoms peaked and were at their absolute worst right before their period.
Wow. During that late luteal phase we've been unpacking.
Exactly. Another 36% noted their symptoms were worse during their period, which tracks perfectly with those estrogen levels hitting their absolute lowest point while the tissue is still recovering from the relaxin surge.
Okay, but let me push back on something here. If these hormones are surging every month for 2 straight weeks, why doesn't someone leak every single time they jump or sneeze during that entire phase?
That's a really good point.
Like, why might you have a perfect leak-free run on a Tuesday, but struggle during the exact same route on a Thursday?
Because your pelvic floor is a highly dynamic system, and laxity is only one part of the equation. Most days, your neuromuscular system can compensate for a little bit of tissue looseness or a little bit of extra pressure.
So your muscles are just working overtime.
Right. They work slightly harder to make up for the slack in the ligaments. But compensation takes energy. When you combine your normal daily activities, exercise-induced muscular fatigue, and this peak luteal tissue pliability, your body's compensation mechanisms just hit a threshold.
The muscles just get too tired to keep compensating for the loose ligaments.
The system gets entirely overwhelmed.
Yeah.
That is why leakage can feel so delayed or inconsistent. It's why it might happen at the very end of a workout when the muscles are fatigued, or be completely absent on a day when you are well rested, even if your hormones are peaking.
If we look at the rest of our sources, it becomes really clear that it is not just the structural backstop that is failing.
Not at all.
The bladder itself is actively being manipulated by these exact same luteal hormones. It isn't just a mechanical failure of the ligaments, it is this complex biochemical pileup.
It really is. We have focused heavily on how progesterone degrades the connective tissues, but progesterone also has a direct, profound effect on the detrusor muscle.
You mentioned the detrusor muscle. Is that the main muscle holding the urine inside the bladder, or is it the one responsible for pushing it out?
It is the smooth muscle that actually lines the wall of the bladder itself.
Okay.
Its job is to remain relaxed while the bladder fills, and then contract and squeeze inward to push the urine out through the urethra when it's time to void.
And how does progesterone interact with it?
Studies show that high levels of progesterone directly agitate the detrusor muscle. Following ovulation, as progesterone levels rise from that corpus luteum, researchers observe a noticeable increase in detrusor muscle activity.
It gets twitchy.
Yeah, it becomes unstable. It starts contracting more frequently and more aggressively. So not only is your external support system getting looser, but the internal muscle controlling the bladder is getting twitchier, just wanting to squeeze and empty the bladder more often.
As if that wasn't enough of a challenge for the body to manage, the sources indicate progesterone is also manipulating the body's overall fluid volume. Like, how does it do that?
This is a fascinating secondary mechanism, and it involves the kidneys. Progesterone influences the body's osmotic balance and interacts with antidiuretic hormones.
Okay, so it's messing with hydration.
Exactly.
Mm.
Without getting too deep into the renal chemistry, the ultimate result is that progesterone acts as a signal for the kidneys to release the fluid the body has been holding onto. It actively increases your overall urine production.
So the bladder is filling up with a higher volume of fluid than usual and filling much faster than usual.
Which leads to clinical symptoms that heavily mimic overactive bladder, or OAB. You suddenly feel a much more urgent, frequent need to void simply because there's more fluid pressing against a detrusor muscle that is already hypersensitive and contracting.
Okay, so if I'm mapping this out visually, the kidneys are actively filling the bladder with extra fluid.
Yep.
Progesterone is making the bladder muscle contract and squeeze against that extra fluid. And at the exact same time, relaxin and progesterone have tag-teamed to dismantle the structural backstop that is supposed to keep that fluid securely inside when you hit the ground during a run.
You've got it. It's a perfect storm. And there is still one more anatomical factor adding to this biomechanical pileup.
Wait, really? There's more.
Yeah, unfortunately. During the late luteal phase and transitioning into menstruation, your cervix physically shifts its position.
The lowest part of the uterus changes location.
It physically lowers within the vaginal canal. Because the anatomy in the pelvis is so tightly packed, when the cervix drops, it takes up more space and can put added physical pressure directly onto the urethra and the bladder.
Like placing a heavy weight right on top of a water balloon's nozzle?
That is a highly accurate way to visualize it, yeah.
Mm.
That downward weight changes the internal pressure dynamics around the urethra. It makes it even harder for the sphincter to close efficiently and stop the flow of urine because it is already fighting against this external physical compression.
So it's getting squeezed from every angle.
Precisely. When you combine increased fluid volume, increased bladder contractions, degraded ligament support, and physical compression of the urethra all happening concurrently, well, you have an environment where stress urinary incontinence isn't just possible, it is highly probable.
When you zoom out and look at all these overlapping mechanisms, the main takeaway is just how remarkably logical this all is.
It makes complete sense.
It really does. Experiencing a leak right before your period isn't a sign that your pelvic floor is permanently broken or that your fitness routine isn't working. It is a completely predictable response to your anatomy prioritizing a different biological function.
And understanding this biology gives you agency.
Yeah.
It moves the experience of SUI from a place of frustration, confusion, or shame into a place of logic and strategy.
Yeah, you take the power back.
Exactly. By tracking your menstrual cycle, you can anticipate exactly when these structural changes are going to occur and really understand the why behind how your body feels.
Which means you can proactively manage it instead of feeling blindsided. If you know you are entering your late luteal phase, like if you know your connective tissue is currently remodeling itself and your bladder is dealing with extra fluid, that might be the week you swap out the heavy jump rope session or the 1-rep max for something lower impact.
Right, you adapt.
You can adjust your training load to match the structural reality of your body in that specific moment, rather than trying to force your body to perform like a rigid machine when it is biologically programmed to be soft and pliable.
It empowers athletes, coaches, and everyday people to adjust recovery protocols, change movement screening, and basically stop fighting against a biological tide.
Yeah.
If you experience a leak, you aren't failing. Your body is simply operating under a completely different set of hormonal instructions this week.
Let's do a quick recap of the journey we've just been on. We started by exploring the luteal phase, where the temporary corpus luteum gland pumps a massive surge of progesterone and relaxin into the system.
The demolition crew.
Right. We learned how relaxin triggers enzymes to physically break down structural collagen, while progesterone amplifies that looseness, turning a firm pelvic floor into a yielding, pliable net.
Yep.
And because that net can't provide a rigid backstop, the urethra fails to compress during high-impact moments, leading to stress urinary incontinence.
And simultaneously, we looked at how that same surge of progesterone causes the bladder's detrusor muscle to contract more frequently, forces the kidneys to fill the bladder with extra fluid, and how the physical dropping of the cervix adds external pressure to an already overwhelmed system.
For everyone listening, you are now armed with a much deeper structural understanding of your own biomechanics. You know the mechanisms driving the symptom. And that knowledge allows you to work with your body's natural cyclical rhythms instead of constantly feeling like you are fighting against them.
It is a profound paradigm shift when you internalize it. And this raises an important question to leave you with today to explore on your own.
I'd love to hear it.
If our ligaments and tissues physically remodel themselves every single month, fundamentally changing how our joints, organs, and stabilizing muscles function, how might we need to rethink rigid, linear fitness programs and medical baselines that were largely designed around bodies that do not experience these cyclical changes?
Man, that really makes you wonder how much farther we could push human performance if we stopped pretending the human body was a static entity. Next time you feel like your form is inexplicably off, or you experience a sudden leak during a workout, just remember, you aren't broken. Your internal architecture is just under renovation for the week. Thanks for diving deep with us today.